Well, welcome everyone to the November Family Daycare Home Sponsor Call and the CACFP new meal pattern. Before we get started, let's take a quick roll call of all the people on the line. So let's start with CCDS. Who do we have on the line from CCDS?
Carolyn and Debbie.
Good morning, Carolyn and Debbie. How about Mid-Willamette?
Sue and everyone else.
Welcome, Sue and everyone else. And then Northwest Nutrition. Anybody from Northwest Nutrition just yet? And then OCDC.
We have Tammy Brown, Debbie Cosper, and Cindy Andrews.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. I was quickly will introduce who's on the call from ODE CMP. I don't think I've done a good enough job of that on the last few calls, so let's make sure introduce everybody in here. So my name's Dustin Melton, and then we also have
Darcy Miller,
Shirley Wu,
Diane Query, Lynn Reynoso, Vicki Boyce,
and Megan will be in shortly. And so what you should see on your screen is the agenda. Today, the plan is we're going to review any meal pattern memos that USDA or ODE CMP has released on a new meal pattern since our last call of October 9th. We're going to have each sponsor share what have been the successes and challenges with implementing the new meal pattern to date, and then have an update on potential additional meal pattern training for family daycare home sponsors. So first, let's start with a review of the USDA memos that were issued since October 9th. I'm sorry, the USDA and ODE memos. And so there was one memo issued by ODE CMP, and then there was 3 issued by USDA. On October 10th, ODE issued the menu documentation memo for family daycare homes. In the memo, ODE CMP listed all the requirements for adequate menu documentation. All the requirements we have discussed on previous calls, so none of the requirements should come as a surprise to anybody. Just however, before we move forward, are there any additional or any follow-up questions regarding the menu documentation memo?
Well, I can say, Dustin, this is Sue, that I know none of it was supposed to come as a surprise, but evidently I was surprised about some of the documentation, the portion sizes that we're required to document now. So, but that's fine. We redid our form and we have enough room to do it.
Okay. So is that something that, Sue, that's clear now?
No, no,
it's clear to me.
Clear to you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, can you clarify what portion sizes we're talking about here?
So just,
hello?
Yeah, just as a, I think what the concern is, or the question is around the monitoring form versus the documentation on a provider menu. So providers, as we've discussed several times, is the providers do not need to document portion sizes on their menus.
Okay,
however,
good.
with the, yeah, okay. So I think, Sue, the question is around the documentation of portion sizes on the monitoring form.
It is, yes. Thank you for making that clear.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Well, that was, go ahead, Carolyn, sorry.
Well, I'm still a little bit confused. Are you saying that we're supposed to be writing down portion sizes on the monitoring form, or are we asking or documenting that we've reviewed that with the provider? Yeah,
the review tool has an area for you to note the actual portion size of the observed meal. So you should be documenting, or the monitor, excuse me, should be documenting the portion offered for each component for the meal that's being observed.
Okay, so I just, because this is a big deal here, so I need to be really clear here. In the past, we've always observed the portion size, the quantity that's being served, and if there's an issue, we would address that and document it, but we don't write down, let's say where we're observing a meal where there is no issue, okay, children age 3/4 cup is served for this group, or no matter what. Is that what you're saying? At any meal that we observe, we're supposed to be writing down the quantity, the portion size? Or just that to document that it was all okay, or if it wasn't, and then comment, document what our comments are? I'm confused.
So to clarify, the documentation must, so the monitoring form, you would have to document the actual portion offered for the meal that's being, a meal or snack that's being observed as part of the review, the monitoring visit.
So this is something new.
Yes.
What if there's several age groups?
So it's new because we've never had our own template. ODE has not had our own template. So this is something that you want to make sure you're doing. And so you want to make sure and document if you have separate age groups that have different portion sizes, that's being documented on the form too.
Oh, I don't. Isn't this kind of inconsistent with USDA's guidance about not asking us to do more than we were doing before? And I just think it's really going to be difficult. And I'm completely surprised by this today, frankly. I just never understood this thing.
Sure. So this isn't inconsistent with guidance as it is clear that it has to be the amount that's being offered has got to be documented. It has to be confirmed during a meal observation. So technically, this isn't really anything that's additional that's being asked of sponsors. Now, I will say that yes, so newer because we haven't asked for this on our own template in the past.
Well, I get that you're asking us to document that we've observed, or whether or not the meal is of the right size, adequate portion, but to write down the amount it gets to be more challenging. So, but you're asking us to write down the amount in the future.
Correct.
And not document.
Carolyn, it is quite time consuming, and the visits we've been on this month, I mean, shoot, our visits are taking well over an hour now just to do a normal visit because of all of the additional stuff we have to not only observe, document. So it's quite time consuming.
So this is Vicki. I just would like to clarify what the regulations say. In 226.20, it describes the requirements for meals, which is the meal pattern. And in that section, it addresses both the meal pattern components as well as the portion sizes. And in 226.16, it covers the review elements, and that section identifies an assessment of the facility's compliance with the program requirements, including the meal pattern. And then when it talks about what a facility, 226.2 defines that a facility is a sponsored center or a family daycare home. And so basically, monitors have been, from what I hear you saying, observing whether the meal is in compliance both in meal pattern components and portion size. So the new form that we sent out with the memo just has a place for them to document what they actually observe on the portion size. They're already writing down the components. They're just adding also the amount that they observed.
Yeah, we've always written down what we've observed, and well, if it and address the quantities. I did a Saturday visit last weekend and had an issue with the quantity that the person was serving, and I documented that she did finally serve the adequate amount when I prompted her. Okay, do you really think that's a half a cup here? And so it is being addressed, but I mean, as a regular procedure, we haven't been writing down the amount that we observe for every food component that's being served. We just haven't been doing that. And I didn't realize that it was something that was an expectation. Yeah, and I can see where it's going to take more time. Interestingly, we have a staff meeting tomorrow, and part of our training is on portion sizes, and we're handing out our, to our staff at this point, the measuring cups to take with them, new ones, since, we haven't done that in quite a while, but definitely we are.
Could I clarify that we're not asking you to measure? You would train your staff to be able to estimate using various measuring tools to teach them how to measure, but we're not asking you to measure out in the provider's home. We're just asking you to use your best estimate based on their knowledge of what a portion size would look like.
No different than before, observing it, but now we just have to write it down.
Correct.
But not measuring it.
Right. Wow. As you've been training monitors.
So Vicki, I want you to help me with this because and I may need to wait till skip this tomorrow until I really completely understand it, because I don't want to give my staff bad information and then have to go back and change it. So we're asking them to write down portion sizes. We aren't asking them to measure.
No, we're not asking measurements. So as you train staff on portion sizes, you would use measuring equipment, cups, liquid measures, dry measure cups, measuring teaspoons or tablespoons, and show what 2 tablespoons of peanut butter looks like. And then as staff practice with that in your training, they can actually train, during the training, kind of practice measuring and see what it looks like in different size cups to get an idea for what 8 ounces would look like, or 6 ounces or 4 ounces would look like in different size cups. You use water. There's also some handouts from, I think I have mentioned it to Sue before, what you can use in terms of visual reference, household items that can be used as visual reference cues. So they can take that handout. And we're not asking them to measure, and this is something ODE staff, we've actually been doing this for years in our centers, and when we're out on the provider reviews, when we write down, we estimate. You've never seen any one of us measure. We estimate based on what we know for visual references.
Well, Vicki, I appreciate that explanation very much, because that is what we have been doing, and I guess what I was hearing it wrong before, because we haven't measured, and we do eyeball it, and that's how we know, I do keep my measuring cup with me when I go, because like this last person who I visited, and it happened to be grapes, and she seemed to think that she had enough there. I don't think so. So, it's not like I'm measuring everything, but if we have kind of an opportunity to provide a little bit of education there to show, no, 4 grapes isn't quite enough here. Anyway, well, then we really don't have to change anything other than write it down, because if we don't have to measure, I was understanding we needed to measure.
No, you're correct, Carolyn. You had a great teaching moment. You had a measuring cup with you. You had a great teaching moment with the provider. But instead of, you wouldn't write yes or no. Is the portion size adequate? You don't write yes or no. You just write half cup next to milk. And that's all you would do. That's different.
What's important is the evaluation of the meal during the meal service observation. And sometimes I think we think just the meal pattern is just components, but the meal pattern is also appropriate portion sizes, minimum portion sizes. And so documenting that the minimum was offered is important as part of the evaluation of the meal service. And that's why that's included on our tool.
Okay, so I need to follow up on documenting that the minimum is offered and writing the amount when, okay, we have kids that are 2 to 10, so we only have to write the minimum for the youngest child or the older child?
So you're writing what's offered, right? So you're documenting the amount of the serving size, the portion that was offered. for that meal or snack.
For each child.
For the meal. So for the meal. Now, if there's different age ranges that have a different portion size, then you would need to make sure you document that.
Okay, so let me ask another question here, if I may. So again, let's use the example. We have a 2-year-old and we have a 10-year-old. Can we say offered a cup as opposed to a half a cup to a cup? The amount that would cover the oldest child, if that was in fact what was offered?
Carolyn, are you saying, for example, if they gave a half a cup to the younger kids and a cup to the older kids, you could write down 1/2 to 1 cup?
No, I want to say I'm writing 1 cup because it would cover both. Or do I have to say the minimum size to the larger size? Both? Do I have to write them both?
You don't need to write them both. You can do the predominant age group. Like if most of the kids are 3 to 5 or something, just do that. You can note predominant age group. We're okay. Because unless you see, for example, if you see that all of the kids are getting a really small portion size because it's based on the youngest kids that are in care and they're not giving larger portions to the older kids, and you would have dealt with that anyway before, you'll deal with it again now. And you could write down, in that case, you might want to write down that the portion sizes were inadequate for the older kids from whatever age forward, and then you can write down your technical assistance that you've provided. But we're okay if you take the predominant age group. When we're on center reviews, we do what is called a milk study to make sure that the sponsors have purchased enough milk. It's one way to see if they're actually offering enough food. And with that, we use the predominant age group to determine how much milk they should have offered. And so I'm fine if you document just the predominant age group of kids in care. If it's really equal, just take a guess and write down for whatever age. And we will know that you're addressing the appropriateness of the, I should actually say the compliance with the minimum portion sizes for all age groups. If you document one that would be representative of what you're finding, that would be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. That'll make things a bit easier.
You know, I just want to back up a little bit, too, because I want to make sure that everybody saw the final monitoring tool and is using it. We had a date in there, I think, of November 1st, that if you had an electronic system for reviewing, that you needed to make sure that all of those items were in there and needed to notify your specialist by November 1st. And I think the rollout was a little bit later, so I don't know. We haven't heard from anybody, so if you take a look back at what's out from us and you see that you need to contact your specialist as soon as possible, and we'll work with you on it.
I have. CCS sent me there.
Did they send you something?
Yeah. I still.
Okay.
So are we going to be hearing from you soon, Dustin?
Yes, you will.
Thank you.
If there's anybody else who's on the line who's not doing this, just contact your specialist. Not using the ODE template, or if you have an electronic review tool, contacting your specialist to see what the next steps are.
Can I ask, excuse me, is the final draft dated October 10th, 2017? Is that the final draft?
We'd have to look that up. I don't recall the date of the final draft. We'll double check that for you.
Okay. Ours is printed and ready to go.
Ready to go, Linda.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward. I want to get to the memos that USDA issued. So there were 3 memos that were all issued on October 20th, and it appears that Fridays seem to be the day that USDA likes to send out their memos. 2 are Q&As on the new meal pattern, and the 3rd is related to the infant and preschool meal patterns in National School Lunch Program, which, of course, doesn't apply to family take-home sponsors. But I want to take just a little bit of time to talk about the first 2 memos. The first one was related to the grain component and a new meal pattern. The title of the memo is Grain Requirements in the Child Milk Care Food Program, Questions and Answers, and it provides revised guidance on the grain requirements. The revision clarifies how to determine if a grain product is credible and if it meets the whole grain rich criteria, provides updated guidance on how to document compliance with the grain requirements, includes an updated Exhibit A, and has new questions and answers. And so we have sent some follow-up clarifying questions to USDA, and once we have a response, we'll go ahead and get that memo out as soon as possible. Has anybody seen the memo, the grains memo, that has questions?
Yes. They gave it out, or they talked about it at the conference.
So I'm sorry, do you have any questions on that one?
No.
I'll tell you a question that we've had from providers, and how they know, I don't know, but anyway, it had to do with why are we telling them they have to take copies, make copies and keep copies, and we did find something in writing about that, so that's the only question that has come up for us recently.
So just so you know, in the grain memo, there's an additional thing that, because we just came back from a National State Directors Conference just this last week, and it talked, we focused on CACFP in summer. And there's, in that memo, there's a section called the Rule of Three. And I believe what was conveyed to us is that USDA was trying to make this easier, but it seems to have thrown a bit of a wrench into easy.
Yes.
So that's the main area where we have questions with USDA, and so once we get those clarified, like Dustin said, we will send that out because it's clear as mud to us. And if it's clear as mud to us, it's going to be clear as mud to everybody else. And a lot of I think every other state had the same reaction as well. So I know USDA is going back and taking a look at it, and hopefully we'll get some clarifying information soon.
That would be awesome.
What was the date on that grains correct question and answer?
So it was
Overnight.
Yeah, and that was, Linda, so that was right from USDA, and we haven't turned it around yet because we have questions. We need to, so if you haven't seen it, it's because we haven't issued it yet, because we have some questions we need the USDA to respond to, like Linda mentioned with the Rule of Three.
Oh, okay. You had
It's on the street, so like Sue mentioned, they brought it up at the conference she was at. So if you do see it, or if you see it, hear about it before we issue it and you have questions, I'll make it.
Okay.
Okay, so the second USDA memo is related to infants and the new infant meal pattern. The memo is titled Feeding Infants and Meal Pattern Requirements in the Child Milk Care Food Program, and includes a Q&A. And this memo provides revised guidance on feeding infants and the infant meal pattern requirements. This revision clarifies meal documentation requirements related to the infant meal pattern, incorporates updated guidance on providing meal accommodations for participants with disabilities, and includes new questions and answers. And so we are hoping to get that one out pretty soon. We had a couple of questions also for USDA, but this is one we are planning on getting out soon. If those that have seen the memo, are there any questions that we can answer? Sue, you might be the only one that's seen it to this point.
I have not. Okay, actually there's questions from providers, and it's because of the 2 separate age groups now instead of 3. And basically we've pretty much told providers that it's parent driven what their infants are offered, because some providers feed cereal and fruits at 6 months, and others, it was always understood that they didn't have to provide that until 8 months, and so there's just some confusion, and it'll just take a while to walk providers through this and get them to understand it a little more.
I have a question on the infant. This is Linda.
Yes. Go ahead, Linda.
My question is, if you see the parent is offering fruits and vegetables and cereal and meats to an infant, but they're only going to give formula snacks, aren't we need to encourage them because the child is developmentally ready to serve all? Or do we take it away?
So will you say that again, Linda?
Yeah, I think I'm missing it.
I think we might have missed something.
Okay, so the infant is being offered all the components at lunch and breakfast, but at snack they're only being offered the formula and a cracker. Because the child is developmentally ready, they need to serve all of it, or do we take that away? Or just encourage them?
Linda, this is Vicki again. One of the things that you would speak with the provider a little bit is one of the things it says in the Q&A is that the infant can be fed kind of what's their usual meal pattern. And so I guess my question would be to talk with the parent or guardian to see, is this all the child is being offered lunch, solid foods at lunch and then not offered anything at snack? Is that their usual meal pattern? Again, it's like Sue was saying, somewhat parent driven. It might be also maybe the provider, just because the meal pattern has changed with the addition of the fruits and vegetables in the snack. They may not understand that. And so that, I guess, is a conversation with the provider to find out, is this because that's how the parent wants the infant fed, or is it because they're not understanding that that other component is added?
Okay. Okay. It just said if it was developmentally ready, so.
I think what Sue said and what Vicki said is the parent-driven part is really important. USDA really focused a lot in their training to us, and hopefully we conveyed that in our training, that a lot of this has to do with developmental readiness as well as parental preferences and how the parent is feeding the child at home and what they want for them in care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And then the last memo that was issued from USDA was only applicable to NSLP, so it doesn't apply to this group. Let's move on. During our October call, it was recommended that each sponsor share what their successes and challenges have been with implementing the new meal patterns. And I did send an email on November 1st asking each sponsor to be prepared to share. So what I want to just do is take the next few moments and allow each of you to relay what your successes and challenges have been up to date. We're a good month, almost a month and a half into the new meal pattern. So let's go ahead and go round robin, and I'll start with CCDS. So Carolyn or Debbie, can you share what have been your successes and challenges with the new meal pattern so far?
Well, I think challenges was when providers wanted to see where it said that they had to keep labels for whole grains. So I know on October 25th you sent out a memo and it addresses that, so I'm happy to share that with those providers who are questioning. Successes, we've been, going to the visits with what we call a checkoff list that goes over basically all the changes and making sure that we're all on the same page. And during menu times, we're using that same checkoff list to send back to them if they weren't meeting the requirements at this time. So that's kind of where we're at, and we're still doing visits with groups. We'll be in Roseburg in a couple weeks.
You didn't pay for it.
Great, thanks, Debbie. Would you mind sharing that with me, the document that you created, the checklist?
Sure.
And might be something we could share with the group. So just send that to me when you get a chance.
It's also on our monitoring review that we sent you.
Okay.
I believe you have that.
Gentle reminder. Thank you, Debbie. It's my gentle reminder to look at that. Okay, thank you. Anything else for Debbie, Carolyn?
I'm sorry, I stepped out for a minute.
Okay.
So I'm sure we're good.
Okay. How about for Willamette, Sue? Challenges and successes?
Okay, well, let me start with the successes. Actually, there are many providers that are somewhat happy about the new rules because of the increased nutrition. So that's a success. But the challenges, as I said before, the visits are taking much longer. And so for those of us that have, 147 providers, it's difficult because the visits are so long. So providers are having the issue with whole grains, the labels for whole grains, cereals, yogurts, and writing the brand name on the menus. I mean, it's a lot of additional stuff. So we're getting there. We've given them lots of ideas on, ways in which they can keep their labels, take pictures, cut the labels out. Actually, the envelopes full of labels have actually been the easiest. So, we're only into the first month and a half, as you said, so it's taking a while. But I think questions that providers have mainly are, what is a whole grain? So many of us here at the office have spent hours in the stores searching for whole grains because it's nice to give our providers a list so they have something to go by. But still, they're sending pictures. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? And it would be lovely. I know things change all the time, but if we had a major list of all the whole grains that are claimable as a whole grain, it'd be so awesome.
This is Megan. I have to tell you that our center sponsors are doing the same thing that your providers are doing. Grains is very difficult, so
yeah.
We feel that. And nationwide, it's a big problem. This isn't providing any solutions, except for we know that USDA knows that they need to provide everybody with more support on the area of whole grain. But
okay. Well, as long as they know, and we all know that, yeah, it's a hassle. I was when we first heard about a 1-year transition period, I thought, oh my gosh, that is way too long. But you know what? I'm really happy that we have that.
Mm-hmm. I am too. I kind of wish it was 3 years. Because in our review of sponsors, it's basically a 3-year cycle, and so we will see a third of our sponsors this year, and the other 2/3 won't get that.
Right.
Assistance. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sue, could I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
What do you think accounts for the increased length in your visits? Is it because of the technical assistance you're giving to the provider, longer training period?
Mm-hmm. All of that. The technical assistance, the additional, there is definitely more writing on the monitoring review form than we've had before. So there's that. There's the fact that I have to put my glasses on to read it, so that takes a while. But mostly, yeah, it's the technical assistance, and it's because when we're in the home, providers will bring out, they'll bring out their loaves of bread, they'll bring out their cereals, and they'll have us, give them a yes or no. And of course, as you said, that's a teachable moment. It takes a long time. So the visits are just longer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Sue. And then Northwest Nutrition, Linda?
We're kind of the same thing. I think the visits are taking longer, and providers don't seem to be real happy that we're taking their time away from their children. They're not keeping brands, keeping labels, that type of thing. So we're trying to teach them how to determine on the yogurt and the cereals. And we've got it in our book that you gave us. And what else? What's our success? Oh, and we also, there was a free, well, it wasn't free. It said it was free little, from the free little handout that you just paid shipping on the new changes. Do you remember, anybody remember that? But anyway, we just made up our own little flyers that's like a checklist of changes. So we made our own because I didn't want to pay for the shipping.
Hey, Linda, so same request that I had from CCS. Can you send your checklist into Megan?
Sure. I can do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then OCDC, challenges and successes.
This is Cindy, and I think one of our challenges is that it's taking a lot longer to do the menus as well. We're having to write a lot more notes and see phone calls and just the technical assistance part of it. Some of the successes are that a big percentage, most of the providers they seem to be getting it. They're writing the right things down on their menus, and they're not, they have the whole grain, well, it sounds like it anyway, that they have the whole grain thing down. We've suggested that they highlight it themselves so that they know they have one each day. And when I'm processing menus, I highlight it so I know they have one. So it's been going better than we thought. It's just taking more time. And like somebody else said, that a lot of the providers are really agree with the changes because of the nutritional part of it. They really think it's a great idea. So.
Always nice to hear that.
I have a question for those of you guys that serve providers who are non-English, or English is their second language, or they don't speak much English. I'm just curious. I think all of you have providers in that category. Just in the general term, what's their experience? Or is it pretty much the same as with all the rest of the English-speaking providers, or is your experience with those providers a little bit different with the meal pattern rollout?
Carmen?
Well, we can ask more specifically tomorrow at the staff meeting, but from what I gather at this point in time, it's pretty much the same kind of issues that English-speaking providers have. I haven't heard anything other unusual.
I agree.
I can tell you, Carmen just let me know that actually her caseload, which is Latino, is actually doing quite well. She did a in-person group training and had like 60 people come, and so that actually has been quite helpful, and we used the training that we were given in April. I do hear, though, on the Russian caseload, one thing that is a little more difficult is many Russian providers, most Russian providers make their own homemade breads, and so we're having to require recipes so we can make certain that they're whole grain. So that's a little additional step that Yelena has to do.
That's good information. Really, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm actually really happy to hear that for the most part, it's about the same for all populations, but if you run into some other challenges, feel free to email your specialist. It's not like I can guarantee that we would be able to make resources for you, but it helps enlighten us and maybe helps us look for those resources in addition to you looking for them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move forward. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. That's helpful for all of us as well as ODE CMP to know the challenges that you're running into and your successes, because we always want to highlight those successes as well. So next, I'd like to discuss an opportunity for additional meal pattern training. And so this is something that Shirley Wu is spearheading, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her, and she's going to provide you with some details. Shirley?
All right. So hi, everyone. I wanted to let you know that we have recently received funding from USDA to help CACFP sponsors be more successful on the new meal pattern. So as part of this project, we're going to be producing technical assistance aids and have some trainings that will be online or by phone. And this will be sometime in 2018. These trainings will be 6 weeks long with one meeting a week to discuss meal pattern questions you might have, such as whole grain questions, as we've heard today. The goal will be to produce a month-long credited menu at the end. And we would like to have one training that's focused purely on family daycare home sponsors. And the trainings aren't ready at this time, but we'd like to gauge your level of interest. And if you are interested, what time between March 2018 and July 2018 would work best for you? So if you don't mind, you can just let me know right now on the phone, or you can email your specialist later. But if anybody wants to chime in, feel free to let me know what you think.
Shirley, this is Sue. I think that would be awesome. We would be very interested in that. And as a timing issue, like March, April, May would be okay. Not April. I'm sorry, not April.
Okay, so March and May. All right.
Or January, February, that's fine too.
I hear you. Okay.
Okay.
So does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I would not want to see it the last week of February through the middle of March. And this is for sponsors, correct?
So yeah, this would just be for sponsors.
Okay. No, that would be good. But those are that I can think of right now. That would be the time that would be the least desirable for CCDS.
All right. Sounds good. So anything from Northwest Nutrition or OCDC?
Yeah, I'm interested. I just don't know what the time frame.
Okay, and that's fine. If you have any idea later on, you're more than welcome to email us.
Okay, thank
And
you.
this is online, correct?
This would be online.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
How long
would
would
it be interactive too?
Would it be like an hour call like this, or what?
Yeah, so it would be very similar in format to this. The idea is that we would be discussing, best practices, some challenges you might be seeing out in the field, and just having a good discussion between all of the different sponsors that's out there.
Would this also be on YouTube after the fact?
No, so it wouldn't be at this point.
That would be nice if it was available somewhere that, someone who missed it would have the option to go listen to it.
Yeah,
So part of this project is we're having what are called cohorts, or kind of groups, training groups. We'd have like 4 to 6 sponsors in a cohort, and Shirley would lead through the requirements and have discussions and talk about technical assistance on these calls. So each call is going to be unique because we have how many cohorts?
20.
20. So it would be really difficult, but it's something that we can think about to figure out if there's a way that we can have a kind of a generic template of what Shirley would have maybe discussed and put that on YouTube.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that once all of these cohort trainings are completed, that we'll have a portfolio of tools and trainings that we can provide.
That would be awesome.
I don't think we heard from OCDC.
Right, yeah, OCDC. Anybody from OCDC?
As far as timing goes, we don't really have a preference. Avoid the summertime probably, so spring.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Shirley. So we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions, any topics that you would like included on any upcoming calls?
I have a question. Patsy wanted me to ask when, or is it already available, the Spanish review form?
That's one we don't.
Yeah, you guys would need to take care of your own translations if you need to.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? This is Linda. I thought that the monitor reports were all done in English. That was fine. I did not have each staff translate. I just had them all printed.
Right, that's correct. If the sponsor wants to have them translated, you can, but you have to keep in mind that whomever is overseeing the monitors and needing to read those reports will need to be able to understand what they say. And so that's why we published them only in English.
Right, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay, and then if there's an error, then they'll write it in their language and our language. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or topics that you would like us to address in a future call? And if you don't have any at the moment, that's absolutely fine. If you do have a topic you want us to address, if you can just send that to the community nutrition inbox, we'll be checking that, and we will make sure to include it on our next call. If nobody has anything else, thank you everybody again for your time. I thought this was a really beneficial call, and I hope you are enjoying these calls because I think they've been really good for us as for U.S. sponsors. And so I think it's November, right? So we have Thanksgiving coming up. So everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you in December.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.